really. And but I want to tell you about how it affected me personally, and how it sort of brought into focus a lot of things that have been going on in my life, and the things that I've been involved with. So I need to go back and tell you a little bit of a story about me before I can get to the book. So I studied in this college called SRCC. It's called Sri Lanka College of Commerce, but actually it's also Commerce and Economics. We were the more glamorous side of this, right? But this was a time when Delhi University had some really great economists. Delhi School of Economics was started by a guy called Dr. Kate Raworth. He was like, he had actually studied under Keynes, and Nehru brought him home to sort of teach us economics. And then he had, among his disciples, were people like Amartya Sen, who went on to win the Nobel Prize, and Manmohan Singh, who of course went on to be Prime Minister. But all these economists were extremely left-wing. They all believed in the things that we now understand Nehru, the policies of the Nehru era. And therefore, all of us in economics, who all thought we were these high-end intellectuals, and we were sort of surrounded by people who told us that the Soviet Union was right and America was wrong. And here was I, a 18, 19-year-old kid in college, and I read this book. And this is a book by Milton Friedman called Free to Choose. And I got converted, and I became a capitalist, but it was unfashionable to be a capitalist in India, right? At a time when, people thought that it's all about being left-wing, and the whole of Delhi University was about being left-wing. Here it was being right-wing. And what this guy talks about is the fact that, economists think of human beings as machines, right? As people who respond to incentives and penalties and those kind of things. And guess what? All of the things that he was teaching were actually being implemented. At that time, Ronald Reagan was President of the United States. Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of Britain, which just tells you how old I am, right, of course. And these people are actually implementing these things. And we have these late-night debates over cigarettes and chai and about which was the right method. And after doing this, I went on and I joined advertising, right? And I'm one of those guys who was never apologetic about being in advertising. I always believe that advertising is what makes capitalism work. And capitalism is really what makes any economy work. And I always believed that the left-wingers never knew how to run an economy. And then as I moved on and I became an MBA and sort of learned all the quantitative techniques of marketing, and I believe that marketing could be quantified, because that's the high you get when you learn numbers. And you believe in things like conjoint analysis, and you think that everything can be brought down to that. It's a big high. And that's the world I lived in for almost 20 years. And then in this century, we started learning some new things. Behavioral economics. Nothing gets me to read a book like if the author wins a Nobel Prize. And so, of course, in 2002, the first Nobel Prize for economics that was won by a non-economist. And so, of course, I had to read this book, and I'll come to that in a second. But after that, you started reading all these things about behavioral economics and about how human beings behave. And this famous thing about saying that, human beings are we like Spock, or are we like Homer Simpson? And Homer Simpson makes mistakes. He falls in love. He's stupid at times. He's emotional at other times. But economists believe human beings are rational. They have no space for feelings. And you start saying, hey, there's something wrong with this. And then you start saying, if human beings are not that precise, then how can we ever get to equilibrium? And as this world starts changing and things move fast, and you realize that equilibrium myth is something that's never going to happen. And then over the last 10, 12 years, I've got into the social sector. And as you get into the social sector, you hear of lots of other things where the market simply fails, right? It cannot deliver. And among them, the big things, some of the stuff that you're writing about, which is this business of 1% of the world has 50% of the wealth of this country. And you've got to start saying, okay, how does that work? And more importantly, when the club that we are in is going to be underwater in possibly a few years' time, And I live actually across the road, and my house is possibly going to be underwater too. And you start saying, okay, this is not something that economics can deal with. And how does it deal with all of this? And then in a neighboring country of ours, there's a guy who had this great idea of saying that GDP is a stupid idea. And how can I get the National Happiness Index? And so you have all these thoughts swirling around in your head, and you start saying, how do all these things meet? Where do they meet? Do they meet at all? And what I found in this book, what was amazing in this book, was that's what this lady's done. This is Kate Raworth, the author of this book. And she's put it all together in this donut that she was holding in her hand, which doesn't look very appetizing, but that's really what she's done. And the starting point is to look at a diagram that is there in every economics textbook. It's created by this guy called Samuelson, I'm sorry, I'm also a bit of a teacher, right? So I have to. And it basically says this is what economics is all about. There is the household sector, and then there is the business. And the household sector gives labor and capital to business, and therefore business gives goods and services back to the household sector. And because this is the transaction, there's some money things also flow. So the business gives the household sector wages and profit, and the household sector in return spends that money and gives it back to them. And this is a very neat cycle. This is how the economy works. And then they say actually there are a few leakages, right? Savings is a leakage because it gets it out of this economy. Taxes are a leakage. Imports are a leakage because it goes out of the country. But on the other hand, there are some infusions as well, and therefore investments are infusion, government spending, exports. But she looks at this and says, there's something seriously wrong with this. And the biggest thing that's wrong with this is completely ignores women. And all the work that women do, which is unpaid work, and there is no place for that. It's all the caring you do and the household work, and especially in developing countries where women go and work really hard just to go and get water or just go and get the fuel and things like that. And how does this enter into the economy? And meanwhile, what about the environment? Can you keep doing this forever? What it does not take into account is the fact that to make that machine run, you need a lot of resources, and those resources are finite. And so what happens with all of this? And of course it ignores the entire fact that the reason we're doing this is not because we're having fun running this machine round and round, but because it's finally for human benefit. It's for the benefit of mankind. And have we forgotten about what benefits mankind? And who mankind? Which mankind? And therefore what she has is the donut. That's what I've come to finally. And what she says is, look, all of economic thinking, all of the economic work we do needs to be done such that we cover these basics, what she calls social foundation. It's to cover food and water and health and energy and education, income, peace and justice, maybe social equality, gender, all of these basic stuff. That's the foundation. And on the other hand, and then there is a space. This is the space that we can come. We come back to that. And on the other extreme, we've got climate change and ocean acidification, all the resources that we've got in the world. And she says basically, the economy has to be balanced in the green space. That is the just space that human beings can be in. And the problem is, so it must be enough to cover the basic inside bit and not so much that it goes outside. There's a shortfall and there's an overshoot. And she says this is the position of the world today. You can see that the red bits are the shortfall. So we've got a shortfall in health where there are millions of people around the world who don't get health and food and water and all the rest of it. We can see that climate change and biodiversity and things like that which have gone completely haywire. And this is really the starting point of the book. This is the donut that she talks about. And then she moves on to say, therefore, 7 principles about talking about how this donut can be brought into practice and so on. And I thought in many ways this brought the whole thing back into my head, all the other things that we've been thinking and talking about for a really long time. And so really in conclusion, all I'm saying is that you think of the economy as being this machine, this famous picture from modern times, Charlie Chaplin, and this business of mankind being really just in this machinery of this modern world. We're just a cog in the wheel. And actually what Kate Raworth is saying is not that. The real analogy is we're more like gardeners. Just this my slide which is to work. Can you just stop that? Yeah, thank you. We are more like gardeners tending a garden, and that's really what it's all about. That's really what the economy is all about. So I think that in many ways, this is a really, really important book. It changes the way you look at economics. It changes the way you look at business. It changes the way you perhaps look at your own life, because you suddenly see that the importance of balance, because you realize that GDP cannot be maximized, cannot go up forever and things like that. So in many ways, that's changed me. So thank you very much.